My feeling is that Israel is a country with a tremendous amount to offer. And they're very complementary, but it's true. We're an innovative country in areas like water management, agriculture. These are areas where Israel can contribute to the world, and I'd like to see us focused on that and have a sense of contribution and doing what we can to really make the world a somewhat safer and healthier place, even though it faces such a huge climate challenge. This workshop really emerged in the aftermath of the Copenhagen UN Conference on Climate Change. Many of us in Israel were concerned that given the lack of a coordinated international response, this might be an opportunity for Israel to do even less than it was already committed to doing. And the McKinsey report seemed to be a good focal point because it really was driving the fairly modest Israeli targets for reduction of greenhouse gases. And so the notion was, if we can bring together some experts, that'll be an impetus to get all the top thinkers in the area, both from academia, government, NGOs, and the industries that are related to this, and get them in a room together to think about this. Everybody would like to do better. Perhaps if we combine our thinking, we can.
That workshop came in a very important state because the Israeli government is now in the beginning of its policy shaping and framing. There's a ministerial committee that was established according to a government decision that is working on an action plan, regarding greenhouse gas reduction. And this kind of conversation, experience sharing was very important in that stage.
There is the feeling that the domestic debate is somewhat difficult to move forward sometimes because it's the same players again and again, and maybe the positions don't change that much. It's maybe a bit of a situation with too much inertia, and I have the feeling that if we come now from the exterior and have a fresh view on things, that together with the participants we could hopefully come to a certain set of key messages that could focus attention on not only what are the targets, but what should really be done now to get going, to get moving, because I think that's probably the main problem here in Israel. That there's just not so much experience, so people are even more skeptical than in other countries.
Just as as climate change creates a bunch of negative feedbacks where the loss, more atmospheric carbon, that's what we started, creates these feedbacks, less soil moisture so that you have less agricultural fertility, so people start migrating, so you have conflict, ethnic tension, and war, these negative feedbacks that build up. The solutions to global warming create positive feedbacks. And this is a very, very powerful proposition. You have greater security. You build that smart grid. You have less vulnerability to terror. So we need to think very creatively about the solutions that we're offering with climate change, not think of them as costs, but think of them as positive long-term investments in a greener, better economy, a better future. We treat inaction as if it is costless. In global warming, that you have the cost of taking action, but in all of our assessment of the costs of mitigating climate change, we never accurately quantify the costs of absorbing the impacts of global warming. A path of inaction is a path of climate crisis. It is the path, the business as usual path is very, very, very costly and destructive. Global warming is fundamentally the result of market failures. There's two types of market failures that are driving global warming. One is the incomplete accounting for the costs of pollution which is absorbed by the atmosphere for free. So we're over-consuming a limited consumable resource. because we're not accounting for carbon emissions as being costly. There is another set of market failures, which are we're underinvesting in positive externalities. We are underinvesting in clean energy because we're not accounting in our market transactions for energy. We're not accounting for the national security benefits of not having to defend shipping lines to protect the oil. We're not accounting for all of the benefits that come from less asthma and child health and all of these other things. So these market failures are very deep.
Unlike a lot of countries, I think Israel actually has something beyond its emissions reductions to add to the world. Israel can actually contribute based on innovation and based on its sort of entrepreneurial culture and its sort of high-tech culture and experience with renewable energy. And a lot of countries can't say that. So, outside of the 20 biggest emitters, those are responsible in the short term for making the big reductions and actually trying to get us on the right path. Israel actually can sort of do that, but then kind of look beyond that and say, what are the technologies we're going to need? And that can benefit Israel and that can benefit the world. And I think that's Israel's contribution.
I just want to highlight, I was particularly hit by the fact that you are a very, almost a very developed country. I don't know how the argument goes in Israel there, but you're certainly not a developing country, I would say. So you have, let's say, the moral imperative to do something about your emissions. At the same time, you're one of the few countries that is economically very developed, but still hit by the impacts of climate change. So you guys are really, let's say, will be suffering from it. We in Germany, we might be doing a lot on the mitigation side, but actually the adaptation stuff, that's quite far off for us. I mean, we're still doing things, but for you guys it's much more urgent. In both mitigation and adaptation, you guys possess a lot of technology and knowledge, and that's also unique. So I think this whole opportunity business is really true, and especially true for Israel in a wide array of fields. It seems that Israeli politicians have a lot of trouble focusing on any long-term issues in general, and I think that's even more difficult for climate change because it seems even let's say further away than any other issues. So when you talk about with people here, and I read before, 60 years of history and only 2 prime ministers serving a full term, that is contrasting very much with the need to have a long-term institution that manages the response to climate change.
I think in the next few years we're going to have some answers about the ability of Israel to internalize and to include climate change consideration, whether it is a carbon price, a carbon tax, or other policy measures that will take into account pollution damages. I consider those few years as crucial regarding environmental policy, and I'm looking forward for that.
Israel's future position in that field is difficult to predict, and I would say that there can be both a very positive scenario in which Israel takes on the challenge and which is manifold and special for Israel, as I highlighted before. But and we all believe here at the workshop, at least we 3 and other people too, that Israel actually would have the capabilities to tackle the problems and to develop the solutions and present that to the world. So I think in that positive scenario, Israel both moves on that issue, mitigates climate change, adapts to climate change, and also, which makes it more robust domestically or more resilient. But on the other hand, I think by supplying technologies to the world and showing how Israel has managed both to mitigate and to adapt to climate change, I think Israel could serve as a role model plus, let's say, a provider of solutions. On the other hand, I think there's also a very, very realistic chance of Israel failing to embark on that path.
But you could see that as a very, very robust pathway toward long-term regional peace and stabilization, is having a shared regional interest with Egypt, with Jordan, broadly, for water, for energy systems, for natural gas. This is a big issue about moving from coal to gas, is protecting the supply lines of future pipelines, having redundancy and robust distribution.
From the rest of the world's point of view, Israel could undertake actions which would actually help solve the climate problem. And I think Israel is almost unique for a country of its size in actually being able to do that. And what I mean by that is what the world really needs, and Bracken started off with showing just how steep the rise in concentrations are, and really how tough it's going to be. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat it. We really need not just deploying existing good technologies or slightly improving them, but we really need the game changers, as you could say, real innovations in technology, and as well as rapid improvements of existing technologies. And Israel is very well positioned to help with that. So, this is something that it's economic development for Israel. It's kind of a win-win, but it's also, I think, the world needs Israel to really step up and show leadership in this area. Just as Israel has become sort of innovation centers for some big corporations like Intel and Google, I think, is now in Israel, and others, Israel could become an innovation center for the world.
Looking now in retrospect that the workshop is behind us, I'm delighted with the results. It far exceeded expectations. First of all, we brought three very different but very, very brilliant experts in this field who, within a day, seemed to coalesce into a single team and had a real ambitious mission amongst themselves about really trying to make a difference here. And the fact that we had such a tremendous turnout of really the best and the brightest who were thinking about the climate change issue at our workshop, and the tremendous response we got in the Knesset, the fact that this group of three international experts met both our Minister of Environmental Protection and our Minister of Infrastructure, produced an interim report and are now committed to make a final report, which the head of the Committee on Health and Environment in the Knesset promises to put on the table in the hand of Prime Minister Netanyahu when they talk about climate change in July. I think this is a tremendous achievement, considering it was only a 3-day initiative, and we came with much more modest expectations.